This is Media Sales Mastery, the podcast for media sales professionals. In each episode, we bring you information, insights, and ideas from some of the industry's top thought leaders. Connect with us to help pick the topic and guide the show.
This is Media Sales Mastery, the podcast for you. And if you're a media sales professional, you're going to really dig this one. I'm your host, Jamie Wood. Our topic today, mastering your sales messaging. Now, in media sales, we live and breathe our media products and our brands. We're at the coalface selling them every day. We're hyper aware of our competitive set. We're hyper aware of their products. You know, we read trade press, we attend conferences, we consume the content of all the different publishers. We're just hyper aware of all the innovations, and we forge a really deep expertise in our assigned media channel. Here's the problem that inevitably arises when you do this. Your product inadvertently becomes the hero of the story, and you start leading your sales pitch and your sales messaging with it. Meanwhile, your client and their objectives almost become something of an afterthought. As the market becomes more complex, as advertising options grow, as we continue to work through a fairly difficult trading environment, we need to have a bit of a reset on our whole market messaging and customer orientation. Our guest today is Will Aitkin. He joins us from Halifax, Nova Scotia. Will runs his own sales training, facilitation, coaching business. He's got this amazing B2B sales virtual course. He does great content. He's the co-founder of SalesFeed. He's the host of the Sell Better podcast. So I'm really excited to get into this one. I did Will's course actually over the Christmas break, and I'm really excited to sort of get into it and unpack the world of sales messaging, but specifically as it relates to this very narrow domain of media sales.
The first five.
Will, welcome.
James, thanks for having me.
Hey, so tell us a bit about your background in sales, and I'm really interested to know what led you to create this fantastic online course of yours too.
Yeah, so my background in sales, like many others, when I first began in sales, it was a bit of a grind, a bit of a slog. Originally, I actually started in recruitment in Sydney, Australia. It's a running joke that all British people who move to Australia have to become recruiters. And while I was there, I was recruiting specifically software salespeople. So I got some exposure to the types of money these folks were making, and it seemed pretty adjacent to the work I was doing as a recruitment agency, because you have to find your own clients, run your own good process. So when I moved to Canada with my wife, which is what brought me here, 'cause she's Canadian, I had this mission to get into software sales, and I wasn't able to because at the time remote work was pretty rare, and I was living in a remote place in Canada. But I did manage to find myself a remote media sales job. And I worked there for about 2.5 years and just suffered. Really bad, low performance. My manager really didn't care. I don't think we ever had a single one-on-one. And I thought that was just how sales was meant to be, feel like a bit of a numbers game. But eventually I got a new gig working in for a tech company, got a good manager, got some great training, and everything changed. So the inspiration behind the course, to tell you about your question, was what would I tell myself working at that job where I wasn't doing well, that I now know, having been taught, coached, and trained in a great way that allowed me to overperform as a sales rep.
Media Sales Mastery.
You know, one thing, I think maybe you found this in your time in media sales, we're very fortunate in media that we have great brands and products. Often they're consumer-facing brands and they're known. So, for example, you know, selling radio or cinema advertising, there's a bit of showbiz to it. The low-hanging fruit for a salesperson is you've got personalities, you might have these heritage brands, and when you're prospecting for new business, you know, I guess I'm curious your take on this. You know, does this type of product still warrant leading with your product? You know, do the principles of that kind of 100% customer-focused selling still apply here, or can you lean a bit on the familiarity that customer might have with the media product?
In a way, yes. So I've built somewhat of a brand for myself as well, which makes selling a lot easier. But I still live with the problems, because even if they know of me and they know of the services I offer, then they still haven't reached out to me, which tells me that they don't feel like they have a need for it yet, for a need for what I offer. So even in these cases of media and brand, if they've already heard of you and they haven't reached out to you, then they're either not aware of the service or feel like they don't need it. So again, that's another reason to talk about those problems. So for media, looking back on what I wish I'd been doing is leading with the problem that was solving for the people. And that was generally that they weren't getting enough visits, revenue, leads from what they were doing today. So even if they had heard of us, they may have written off our service, or they may have just not realized that we offer that. So I could have been like, hey, looks like you're advertising in these places. A lot of folks are finding this problem, which might be lack of leads, getting the same leads over and over again, not reaching new audiences, not reaching the correct audience, and then got into how I help solve that, right? So again, I still think it warrants talking about the problem, and it's not going to hurt you. The only thing that can hurt you really is when you start pitching to someone who doesn't care. Because even if someone is aware of you, then talking about those problems isn't going to make them less likely to engage with you.
Yeah, I think one of the chapters I really enjoyed in your course was the ditch the pitch, right? I think it seems to be like a very specific sales philosophy in that sort of software SaaS tech space. Can you sort of unpack that a bit more, just the whole ditch the pitch ethos and why you're so passionate about it?
As I mentioned, I've pitched a lot in my time. And I think a lot of sellers don't see this side of things because they're not being sold to as often as most decision makers. But no one really cares about you. That's just the reality of it. And I keep going back to this idea. If they felt like they needed what you have, or wanted to learn more about it, then they would have already reached out, or they would already be working with you, or they would already be working with one of your competitors, let's say. So again, the pitching is a no-win game by pitching and selling. It just doesn't add up to someone being interested, because if they were interested, then they probably would have reached out. And most people aren't actively trying to buy something right now. I think the most recent data, which probably came from Gartner or someone like that, is that only 5% of your potential market is actually actively looking to buy a new product. So that means the other 95% aren't actively looking to buy a new product. So pitching to those people who aren't looking for your product is only going to be telling them things they don't care about or think they don't care about. So again, we need to get them in the mindset where they actually care and give them a reason to care. And the thing that people care about most is the problems and challenges that are keeping them up at night today. So again, if you can find a way to identify those 5% people who are looking, that's maybe where a pitch might be applicable, because they already are looking for differentiators and want to know about your product. But for everyone else, they didn't ask, so why are we telling them? That's my philosophy on that one.
Yeah, and it's interesting because, well, for most media sales processes, it typically resembles something like this, where the cold call or the cold outreach will be to secure an uncovery meeting with the prospect, and the whole idea is through that process. It's very much the old school solution sales process. Through that process, you uncover a need or a problem in the business that your product might be able to help solve. You go away, you build a tailored solution, you present and close. And I guess I worry that this approach does need a bit of modernization or reform at the moment. What do you think about that? How does this maybe differ from standard enterprise sales process?
It's pretty similar, honestly. So most sales processes, selling to businesses, this might be different in B2C, but there's some crossover for sure. Is ask questions, understand the problem, figure out what the problem is, and if it's something you can help with, figure out what the impact of that problem is. Is it something that's worth solving? Figure out what's causing the problem. That's what you're going to try and solve, and then present a solution that solves that. And then ideally go, does that look like it's going to do the job? And they go, yes. And then you move on to next steps, which could be closing the deal if it's a small deal, or bringing in more people from their team if it's a larger opportunity. I think that flow works. I think a lot of people break it out too much and don't know when to break that process as well sometimes. So for an outbound lead, you're often introducing a problem to them. So asking them the same questions that you might ask an inbound lead won't lead you to the same result, because then you've got to do some work to get them thinking about it first. Now, some inbound leads are still figuring out the problem themselves, still trying to figure out what's wrong with how they're doing things today, or they might not have agreed on that or already fleshed out. So you might have to help them do that. Now, some people have figured all of that out and are just ready to buy. And if we put them through that process, you're only going to frustrate them. So I think the most important thing is that, yes, it's important to have a process, but it's also worthwhile knowing where there's nuances and exceptions to that process. So I think a one-size-fits-all approach is probably where most sellers go wrong when adopting what we've just described.
Yeah, it's a great call. I think it's Jake Dunlap's a massive proponent of it, that meet the customer where they're at. And I do worry that, standard media sales, there really is a well-defined playbook that almost like you're forcing the prospect to adhere to, rather than being able to diagnose where they might be in terms of their level of awareness, or where they are in terms of their tolerance to even indulge that process. I mean, nobody seems to have time to really indulge you with an hour uncovery and then...
Yeah, and I'm a big proponent, especially for SMB and mid market sales. So that's really deal sizes up to anywhere up to, I'd say, maybe multiple six figures. The exact moment might be a little bit difficult for me to pinpoint. That you can do the discovery and show some solution in the first engagement, especially for inbound folks, because that's really what they often ask for. Book a demo, learn more, whatever it is. If you only spend your time in that first call asking them questions, then they haven't really got what they asked for, and then they have to wait for it, which can frustrate a lot of buyers as well. There's this balance needed of giving and taking, and a lot of times I think that balance is exactly what's off. The seller takes in a lot of discovery, and it can be valuable for the person to figure this out for themselves, but they feel like you're taking because you're asking a lot of them, but you're not really giving anything in return. And even for the most complex solutions, I'm a believer that you can show one or two things that at least let them go, okay, this is going to be worth my time to continue. And doing that, yes, after you've uncovered a problem. So if I have 30 minutes, let's say, of someone, that to me is enough time to at least uncover at least one problem, what the impact is, and what might be causing it. So they say, okay, this person is actually going to be interested, and I think I can help them. Hey, take a look at this. I've only got kind of a couple of minutes to show you this today, but let me know if this looks like a fit. And then I run through it real quick. If it's a software, I give them a quick demo. If it's a media, say, hey, these are typically the types of results people see in the campaigns we run. And then I can ask them, hey, does this look like it's going to help solve the things we were talking about earlier? And recap maybe that problem. And they go, yeah, okay, great. Well, now we've got a reason to book a meeting, a mutual confirmed fit to say, okay, well, typically from here, what I'd do is prepare you a bit, something a bit more custom. That's going to be a bit more tailored to you, your business, your solution. For a media sale, that might be a proposed campaign. For a software sale, that might be, a bit more of a custom in-depth demo where we involve other people from their team and other stakeholders who are going to want to weigh in and ask questions. But that initial fit gives and takes. And a lot of buyers I find are frustrated that they can't always get that straight away, especially those people who have come inbound and are really aware of both the product and their problems.
Oh, absolutely. I recently tried to buy a piece of software as an inbound lead, and I was like, this process is so unbelievably convoluted. It's as if they're so used to doing outreach that when somebody actually comes in and wants them, that you almost have to conform to this really convoluted process, despite being, a very well-researched qualified buyer. This is another one that I found really interesting when I did the course is, a central tenet of most media sales is that we help deliver business growth. And, whether it be let us help you drive more leads, acquire new customers, grow your brand. I know you've actually got a really strong view on selling the gain versus stopping the pain that I'd love for you to sort of unpack here.
Yeah, so flipping that on its head, I sell to pain, not gain. And that's a trap that a lot of sellers also fall into. They talk about the gains of their product. So if we go back to media as the example, the gain of media is more leads, more brand, more website visits, whatever it may be. But that's far less compelling than a pain of, hey, today we're not getting enough leads. Hey, today we're not getting enough website visits. Hey, today no one knows who we are. If I can solve that, that's much more compelling than more leads, more brand, more visits. So when I talk to people, if I was to put myself back in the role where I was selling media sponsorships a couple of years back, I would be more focused on those pains of, hey, a lot of folks aren't getting as many leads as they need. Because the pain of my sales team or our sales, if they're more of a direct conversion, we're not getting enough. That puts someone's job on the line. It keeps them up. It's something they actively think about. Whereas we could always be doing things better, but we don't always. Even as individuals, I could be more fit. I could dress better. I could be more productive at work, potentially. All of those things I could be, but I don't because they're easy to procrastinate and ignore. The things that I care about are really like, am I dying? Am I being divorced? Am I making enough money to keep the lights on at running my own business? Those are more compelling things, and they're all loss related to the absence of something versus, oh, I could have a six pack, but I don't care because there's things that are more pressing, and most of those things are more pain focused.
Yeah, so it's not like you're changing your value proposition necessarily. You're really just inverting the way that you actually position it to the prospect as a potential, avoiding a potential loss.
Especially in prospecting, my value prop wouldn't be we can drive you 1,000 leads. It would be, hey, a lot of folks aren't getting as many leads as they'd like, and I might mention the leads in an email later on in my sequences, let's say. But ultimately, why would they care about 1,000 leads if they've already got enough leads? Why would they care about that? They're not just going, oh yeah, damn, more. Let's just do more, because most people, a lot of folks, especially in this economy, don't have that mindset. They're of the mindset of, if they've got enough, then that's great. And if they don't have enough, then that's a problem. And that's the problem we can solve by selling them some media.
Yeah, and I'd imagine that the best prospects are pretty good at identifying sales outreach. Like that, they'll be able to receive a piece of communication and immediately qualify it as this is a cold email or this is a cold call. How do you sort of recommend people stand out when they're doing their prospecting, or how do you disrupt this with your messaging?
Yeah, it's a really good point. Most buyers aren't out there. No, I get all these comments sometimes on especially on social media, where like, no one wants to buy your thing. If I need it, I'll come and find it. No buyer's looking forward to getting sales outreach. They've got things to do. They're trying to be sold a million different things, and they assume that all of them are junk. That's just their mind. Because again, going back to what we said earlier, if they felt like they needed it, they would have come to you. And that's their mentality a lot of buyers have. So what they've done is learned patterns of how to quickly identify sales outreach and ignore it, because otherwise they would have no time left in their day to actually do their job, managing their team, firing people, hiring people, running campaigns, launching products, whatever it may be. So what we need to do as sellers is disrupt that pattern, do something different to what the vast majority of sales outreach does. And to do that, how to do that, we need to look at the vast majority of sales outreach, which is, for cold calls, underprepared, bad tone, generic opener, poor questions. I can immediately tell on a cold call versus because they're like, oh, hello, how are you? And they're just doing things that everyone else is doing. They're meeting cliches. Same with cold emails. The subject lines are all the same. Hey, Will, want to improve your website traffic? Or, quick question for you, Will. I immediately know what that is. So if we look at all the things that people are doing wrong and just try and do something entirely different, by not being generic, by not falling into these cliche traps, then we're going to stand out and get people's attention more often. And the easiest way to do that often is just doing the bare minimum research to give people a good reason for why you've chosen to reach out to them. So instead of, hey, Will, would you like to increase your website traffic by 10x? It's instead, Will, it looks like your website right now isn't getting any SEO traffic. And there are tools that can help you automate that information as well. A lot of business owners find that that's one of the best ways to keep the lights on, by just getting inbound people, finding them with very little effort. Would you be open to hearing a couple of ways that we could improve that traffic for you, or see some of the reasons why you might be getting listed? That then becomes, they've done their research enough. They haven't just hit me with the same thing they could have sent to anyone, and they could send that same email or make that same call to thousands of people who aren't getting listed right now, and it doesn't necessarily cost any efficiency loss. It's just a little bit smarter of a way of targeting people.
Yeah, and I feel like a lot of those in default channels, like the less intimidating channels, are always so much more cluttered, aren't they? Like,
oh yeah,
it's a hell of a lot easier to automate a bunch of emails than it is to pick up the phone and do a cold call, or to do a video piece in LinkedIn. And I know, talking about that point of prospects being harder to reach, particularly with work from home. Can you talk a little bit about like the philosophy of, multiple attempts and channels to contact a new prospect? Like, why is that important, and how does your messaging sort of play into that as well?
Yeah. So what you're describing is like an omni-channel approach. So that's what people call it. It's basically using more than one method to reach someone. If you're relying entirely on email, you're missing some people who don't read their emails. If you're relying entirely on cold calls, you're missing some people who don't ever take cold calls. So the idea is twofold. Number one, it's trying to reach someone where they're reachable, because everyone's different. Some people will never pick up the phone. Some people will never respond to a cold email. So by using social media, cold emails, cold calls, there's a few other examples as well. We can ask for referrals. We can go to trade shows, whatever it is. We can increase the chance that we're going to meet someone where they're willing to be met, or they're meetable. The second piece of it all is building awareness. So if someone sees my email and then they get a call from me, they might be more receptive to that conversation. So I'm building awareness in their mind of who I am and why I'm reaching out. So that way they either respond yes or no, or are more receptive to me when I call. So that's the idea of using more than one channel.
Hey, I got some listener questions here.
I can't ask my sales manager that.
Hi Jamie, I sell out-of-home advertising to small businesses. My main sales strategy is to identify unsold billboards and then canvass local advertisers within a small radius of that asset. As this includes multiple industries and types of companies, are there any suggestions for how to streamline this and ensure my pitch is still relevant?
So that's an interesting one. So that's really not focusing on an industry sector or a particular type of customer. It's actually prospecting a bunch of different types of businesses and clients who just have one thing in common, which is their proximity to the billboard. Any thoughts there, Will, on how to tackle that one?
Yeah. So I imagine that billboard's had some ads on it in the past. So there's easy talk about past responses. In there, I'd probably make use of some more alternative channels. I'd probably make use of photos or videos in that my outreach to those folks to build the familiarity again, because it's geographic. They've probably seen this billboard somewhere. And I would lead with like, hey, it looks like you're just down the road from, one of our larger billboards. To jog your memory, here's an image, and then I might throw an image up. Other business or X result from this, something you're open to, or something you've experimented with in the past. And that would be my opener with an email to those folks, and it'd probably be a very similar social message as well. If it's a cold call, I might just be like, hey, look, running an advertising space, and you're right down the road from you, 2 streets over. Do you know so-and-so space? And they go, yeah, no. And then I go, okay, well, typically folks, want to put their stuff up there when one of these things is happening. Are any of those relevant to you right now? They go, yeah. Or is your store, restaurant, I'm trying to think of other things that I go to, restaurant, store, hairdresser is absolutely crushing it right now. And they're going to go, well, it's not crushing it. Who's crushing it really these days? If they're honest with themselves. And then they go, okay, well, look, this is typically what people see as a result. Would you open to a bit more of an in-depth conversation? I can walk you through what we do and how we accomplish that. So that might be a bit more of a thing. But I would use the fact that almost anytime you think of someone that you're reaching out to, there's some form of targeting that's gone into it. If you can work that backwards as the reason why you reached out and why they might be interested, that's what I'd go for.
I think that's a unique challenge, that one, because what they're really kind of having to sell on is the proximity, right? There's a finite number of businesses who might be hyper relevant for that asset or who they can actually prospect to. Has there been any sort of success, or would you recommend creating a bit of that competitive tension? Like, this doesn't become available very often. It's actually quite highly desired by a lot of clients in this area. Of the 300-400 businesses, I wanted to call you first. Is this something you'd like to take? Like, is that a bit too aggressive as an approach?
I don't think that's too aggressive. I like you're creating a little bit of scarcity there, So there's a reason to act on it. I also feel like there's a play to, talk about why this might be a better option, or using my methodology, less bad option than some of the other ways they might be advertising as well, right? So, typically when I speak to business owners, they're advertising in the paper, they're advertising online, they're advertising the yellow pages, whatever they're probably currently doing. However, research showed that display advertisement, when within 1 mile of the location, let's say, you could probably find some research on this stuff, because marketers love to research the crap out of the type of thing. They see a X% uptick, right? So then that would probably be more of a follow-up message if you're reaching out several times, because hopefully you are. And that can then help educate and bring awareness to it as well. But I like your message there as well, where you bring scarcity in. A billboard's maybe not, unless it's an electronic billboard that changes. But there's probably some past success. And it's very similar to when you get someone come knock at your door and they say that they just worked with 3 other people in your neighborhood. It does. That's a tactic for a reason. And although I'm not a big fan of using tactics and hacks, it's worked on me for sure. When someone comes by and says, hey, Phyllis next door to you is doing this, I get more curious. So I wonder if there's some more social proof you could run with that type of thing.
I think so. Even just hearing you reflect on that, where you're probably advertising in other channels like newspapers or radio or something like that. That's fantastic for getting people who treat your business like a destination. What this billboard allows you to do is actually capture a lot of that traffic in the area that might not have a specific agenda, but it might trigger them to come in. So you're sort of selling a complementary type of, solution there as well.
I hope it works, So if it works, then you're going to have some kind of success story, either from that specific geolocation, or maybe if you've got multiple billboards around town, then you might be able to share a story of what was going wrong with someone else before they invested in the billboard. That's where I'd think as well.
Great. Well, that kind of gets us to the end of the episode. Tell us a bit more about how to connect with you, and specifically a little bit more about that course of yours, the online course.
Yeah, I won't plug it too hard. You've done a good job of that already, mate. But yeah, if you hit me up on LinkedIn, you can always slide into my DMs. But I'm Will Aitkin, and on LinkedIn, and my tagline is "Trust me, I'm a salesperson." Follow along there. I've also got a YouTube channel just for salespeople called Sales Feed. Up to 10,000 subscribers now. There's almost certainly, regardless what industry or role you're in, if you're in the world of sales, there's going to be something that's helpful for you on there. So go on there and check out the videos available on there.
Will, thanks very much.
Thank you. Appreciate you coming on and waking up so early for me.
No worries. Hey, this is Jamie. One of the things that I think would be very interesting to share with you is how I came to learn about Will Aitkin and how I came to find his B2B sales course. I actually had a bunch of his videos and content start appearing in my LinkedIn feed. He makes very, very comical content focused specifically at people who work in sales. It's a very lighthearted look at the world of sales. He definitely does some great educational stuff and some really great informative content, but it's always with a nice, quirky, comedic kind of spin. This skit that I'm about to play is the audio of some video series that he did, which is all around if other departments were treated like sales. It's an absolute cracker. I'm going to play the audio for you now.
Operations! Everything operating smoothly in here, I trust? Bethany, how's the first day going? Good? Awesome. Well, I thought now would be the perfect time to tell you, before you find out from everyone else in this room, that everything we told you in the interview process was a lie. Yeah, including your salary. So I know we said we would pay you $120,000. You're going to make 60, all right? Happy onboarding. Development. Dev. You've been very unproductive lately. Very unproductive. So we've come up with this genius plan. We're going to bring in a programming influencer to do a 3-hour workshop with you to bring you back up to speed. He's ex-MySpace. Has he done coding in the past 20 years? No. Is he costing us one of your annual salaries for the 3-hour workshop? Yes. But he's going to make you all better because you all suck. It's mandatory. See you there. Human resources. Keeping the resources human. Jeff, quick word. So, you know that new hire, the one that you recruited? Yeah, it turns out Tom actually sent that person, that candidate, an email about 9 months ago. Under the rules of ownership, that was Tom's candidate. As such, we're going to be not paying you your salary this month. Tom's going to get it. Read the fucking rules.